Hello, today we are going to install Fedora Linux 40 with the workstation default desktop, which is using GNOME, and Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, also with the default desktop for x86-64 in two QEMU virtual machines side by side at the same time. So Fedora Workstation 40 has been released in a number of days ago, and Ubuntu is going to be released probably today. Let's download the two ISO files. So for Fedora, we go to latest release, download now Fedora Workstation, and adjust the ISO file for AMD x86-64, this button. Okay, I have already downloaded both ISOs. Let's now start and install two virtual machines. File, new virtual machine. I'm using Virtual Machine Manager, Virt Manager. The host operating system is Ubuntu 23.10. Browse, refresh. We're using Fedora Workstation Live ISO. It's automatically detected as Fedora. Let's see. I have 32 gigabytes of RAM. Let's go with, 8 gigabytes for each virtual machine and 8 vCPUs. Let's make this 120 gigabytes. Fedora 40. Customize, finish. So the virtual machine has been configured correctly by default. The only thing that I usually need to change is in the CPUs tab, details, topology. I don't have 8 CPU sockets, but just one. The rest of the settings are okay by default. The fastest network interface card, fastest hard disk, VirtIO, and tablet for easy mouse grabbing. Begin installation. So it's going to test the media and then start in live mode in 60 seconds. Let's try to create another virtual machine in the meantime. Add new virtual machine, ISO, browse, Noble desktop, choose. It could detect it correctly, Ubuntu 24.04. So almost 8 gigabytes of RAM, 8 vCPUs, 120 gigabytes of hard disk, and no dots. And customize for the exact same reasons, which is the CPU topology. The rest of the settings are okay by default. The best motherboard, BIOS, fastest storage and network interface card and tablet. Begin installation. Says try or install. Sounds okay. Let's resize the Virt Manager consoles to be the maximum height. Fedora has finished checking the ISO, the install media, and then it has started in live CD mode, and it offers me to either continue in live CD mode with not now, or to start the installer with install Fedora. We're going to wait a bit for Ubuntu 24.04 until the installer starts. Okay, so Ubuntu 24.04 installer has finished starting. It has started the installer graphical user interface wizard by default, and we're now at the language chooser page. So let's go there for Fedora 40, install Fedora. Again. Okay, so English US. Continue. English seeing, hearing, typing. What is this? Accessibility. Next. English US. Internet connection wired. An update is available for the installer. No, thank you. And now we're going to install Ubuntu. So next on the Ubuntu 24.04 installer, interactive installer, ton of questions, and we're not yet at the second GUI installer wizard page. So to what Fedora has on the second GUI installer wizard. What apps would you like to start with? Essentials, default. Next. Okay. We're in the Fedora installer. We need to confirm the way the virtual hard disk is going to be partitioned. I'm going to go with the defaults. I have never used the defaults before because probably the defaults will use BTRFS and I always switch to ext4. So don't shrink, don't encrypt, just use the disk. Okay, datetime, that's wrong. How do we search in here faster? Like this. Okay, and done. So we have the keyboard selection, hard disk partitioning, time zone done for Fedora. Optimize your computer, don't install third-party software, not needed, it's a virtual machine. Download and install additional media formats. I have never did any of these, so I'm going to go next. This is the disk partitioning, erase and install. Yes. And we're at the user account. Okay. Let's go begin installation. I'm not sure why Fedora did not ask for user accounts. And the other additional settings that you needed to configure in the installer in previous versions, such as Fedora 40. Name, computer name, same as the virtual machine name, so Ubuntu 24.04. Password, the weakest possible. Require my password to log in. Don't use Microsoft Active Directory. Next. New York. Next. So ext4/vda1 probably for boot or UEFI variables, and swap is probably not a partition but a file. Install. Okay, so Fedora is already copying files, but I did not specify the user account that I want. Most graphical user interface installers for the Linux operating systems should ask you the name of a user, such that after the installer finishes, you have a Linux user available that can use sudo or do as in order to become the user root. The user root is always there. Let's wait a bit. So the Ubuntu installer has already showcased Visual Studio Code and two integrated development environments from JetBrains. Now it showcases Blender and other creative applications, and for gaming, Steam and OBS Studio. Ubuntu 24.04 will be the Linux operating system. If somebody just tells you I am using Linux, in a couple of weeks from now, they will probably be on Ubuntu 24.04 with a default experience with GNOME shell. Unfortunately, the Ubuntu installer doesn't really tell me the percentage. It's just a indefinite progress, whereas the Fedora installer does show me a progress. I have some clue that I'm at the end of the installer, although the progress is just at 40%. Because I know it finished installing packages because it's generating the init ramfs and the bootloader. So yeah, the progress is not that accurate, but at least it's not indefinite. What's the difference between installing the system and setting up the system, right? Just the text that's presented by the Ubuntu installer doesn't really tell me if it finished copying all of the file system that exists on the ISO on the hard disk, or if it's creating users, or what is it doing. If it's uninstalling extra deb packages. Okay, meanwhile, Fedora has finished installing. Go ahead and reboot your system to start using it. Okay, probably this was sort of a OEM installation where after the first reboot, after I don't boot from the ISO, but I boot from the hard disk, it will start a wizard that asks you to create your first Linux user, except the user root. So the user that you're going to use most on your graphical user interface installation of Fedora 14. We're waiting a bit for Ubuntu to finish installing, and then we're going to restart both virtual machines at the same time. So now also Ubuntu 24.04 finished installing. Both of the installers, Fedora 40 and Ubuntu 24.04, have finished. Let's restart both virtual machines. So restart now and finish installation. Okay, interesting. So seems that Fedora only exited the graphical user interface installer application back to the live CD session, hopefully. So I'll probably need to reboot the machine. Clicking on the system tray and on the turn on off button and restart. Okay, remove the installation medium, then press enter. It's a virtual machine. Word Manager will remove the ISO automatically, so I'm just pressing the enter key. Let's press the restart button here. So this was grub on Fedora. Now it's boot loading. The desktop manager has been reached on the Ubuntu 24.04 machine. On Fedora, it shows the OEM setup wizard. So let's see what that does. Welcome, start setup. Allow apps to determine, what is that? Automatic problem reporting. Yes, you can do that. Next. Third-party repositories. Not now. Username. Enterprise login is probably something similar to a Microsoft Active Directory or another directory server. Next. Password. And next. All done. Start using Fedora Linux. Welcome to Fedora Linux Workstation Edition. So this is a common thing in Fedora. The branding of the product is all over the place. It's sometimes Fedora Linux, sometimes Fedora Linux 40, sometimes Fedora Linux 40 in parentheses Workstation Edition, sometimes it's Fedora Linux Workstation, whatever. Take the tour. Okay, where am I? Am I logged in as that user? I don't know. How do I find out? Here. So let's start the terminal. Who am I? Okay, so it created a user administrator, the OEM setup style graphical user interface wizard, created a local user administrator, and then logged into the GNOME shell session as this user. Okay. In here, we're at the desktop manager, which is either LightDM or GDM in Ubuntu 24.04. Let's log in. I'm using my password. Okay. Additional settings wizard. Next. Ubuntu Pro skip for now. Help improve, yes. Share my system data. Next. Get started with more application. Open App Center. Okay, minimize this thing. Finish the wizard. Okay, so this is a taskbar, a main panel with the applications minimized. Here's the App Center that's running and minimized. On the desktop, we have the home directory. Okay, let's open a terminal in here. How do we do that? No idea. This guy. Who am I? Okay, uname -a. Let's increase the font size. How do we do that? Okay, next up, what do we usually do in the command line? Let's see where the swap is. So it's ZRAM on Fedora 40. It's a file on /swap.img on Ubuntu 2404. The Linux kernel 6.80 versus 6.85, the newer in Fedora. What else? df-h. A /boot partition /dev/vda2. There's a home partition. I don't like such a setup. vda3/. Okay, and in here there's vda2 /. Okay, in lsblk on Ubuntu 2404 we can see the mounts for the snap applications that are installed. So there's Firefox and its dependencies. So Bear Core, GNOME 42, GTK Common Themes, Snapd, and then another application Snap Store and Snapd Desktop Integration. And then there's also Snapd Firmware Updater, which is probably needed by the Snap Store, I'm guessing. Okay, so VDA 1, 2, 3 on Fedora and VDA 1 and 2 on Ubuntu, whereas the VDA 1 is 1 megabyte. Similar to what's in here. Okay, let's see the default web browser, Mozilla Firefox. And how do I start it in here? I can just write. So the search by default searches for characters in the character picker for Unicode characters and software. And characters have better priority than software or something. Okay. Let's see what's in here. Fire. It gives search from characters results, but also the app results and or maybe the running apps results. Let's quit. No, it's the list of applications that are installed on the computer. So have better priority than in Fedora, or not. How do we close the application? Control Q. Okay, and this is showing results from applications that you can also install, such as this Crossfire thing. enable third-party repository. So I started GNOME software, which is the App Store for Fedora 40. It asks if I want to enable third-party software repositories. Let's enable them. I'm not exactly sure what it wants to do. And it's showing app details. So probably the GNOME software store is missing from Ubuntu. That's called software. And it's replaced with a very similar application, which is App Center. And App Center does not provide a search provider for the GNOME shell search. Okay, because if I search for Firefox, for Fire, it doesn't give me the possibility of directly installing software that contains Fire in the name, whereas Fedora does. Okay, Crossfire, what is this thing? Multiplayer cooperating RPG game. What is that? How do we maximize? By double clicking on the title bar? It's coming from RPMs, from Fedora Linux, not from Flatpak, FlatHub. What's the URL for FlatHub? FlatHub.org. Okay. So it has opened the search with Fire by default. Nice touch. Installed applications. How do we see the installed applications? I'm not sure. How do we do that? Featured. I don't know what featured I want. The list of applications that are already installed. This guy, manage. Installed and updated. So Snap Store has an update. Let's install it. Unknown snapped exception. We cannot update the Snap Store because the Snap Store is already running. Okay, interesting. So in Fedora 40, released 2 days ago, there's already updates for the GNOME default applications, image viewer, files, settings, software, and for fonts. Okay, let's restart and update. Let's see what that does. How do we install the updates here? Check for updates. Update all. Update this. How do we say restart and install all of the updates, including the App Store? From the software updater. The software on this computer is up to date. This is probably only for deb packages, not for snaps. Let's just change the server. updates. Automatically checks when there are security updates, download and install automatically. Nothing. Or do we say nothing? Automatically check for updates. Interesting that I don't have the option of not doing anything if I have updates available. Display immediately, download automatically, download and install automatically. Let's make this thing the longest possible, every 2 weeks. And this thing download automatically. Interesting option. And close. Reloads the metadata about the repositories of the packages because I have just changed them. So it does update. Fedora has installed updates in the more in the safer way, where it downloads the updates and then it reboots and then it tries to apply all of the updates at the same time or something like that. Such that after the updates are applied, there are no processes that were started before the update has started and the update has finished and all the processes are still running, but the files that were needed or were loaded by the previously running applications don't exist on the hard disk anymore. Because on Linux, when an application is running, the SO files that it has loaded are not locked for writing by default, such as in Windows. Software is up to date, but the snaps are not up to date. So this is software and updates, and the other application is software updates. Okay. So small applications that are dedicated to just one task being doing apt update and then apt upgrade for this tool. Software updates. I don't exactly know the name of the application because it's ellipsized. And then there's software and updates, which is the editor for remote deb repositories. So for /etc/apt directory. This thing. How do I enable source in here? I click on a checkbox and close. And there's extra repositories because I don't only need deb, but I also need deb-src. So it will do an apt update. Okay. So now Fedora is up to date. It has installed several RPM packages during a reboot. The software app store has an icon similar to the icon that's pinned on the main panel in Ubuntu 24.04. Okay. No minimize buttons because So the experience on Ubuntu 24.04 compared to Fedora 40 is more classical. It's more welcoming to the people that come from the Windows operating system because it displays the panel, the taskbar by default, and it displays the start menu by default, and has minimize buttons and maximize buttons. Maximize can be worked around by double clicking on the title bar if you don't have a maximize button. Okay, let's look at the apt repositories a bit. So Ctrl-Shift-T does open a new tab. That's great. Let's become a super user. Let's run the updater by hand. Okay, it does work. Let's install some software. Let's see if that works. Midnight Commander. It installs mcdata, mailcap, libssh, and bzip2. Good choice. Okay, let's go to the directory where apt is configured, /etc/apt. Use the orthodox file manager text user interface application Midnight Commander. And let's see where the sources list is. So there's no longer a /aetc/apt/sources.list file in Ubuntu 24.04, and the sources have moved to a .sources file. So /etc/apt/sources.list.d/ubuntu.sources. Let's go there. The sources.list was replaced with sources.list.d and Ubuntu sources. F4. The easiest is nano. Let's go with mcedit. Okay, there's two groups in here. There's main restricted universe multiverse or noble updates, noble backports, and the same thing, components main restricted universe multiverse for noble security. We're using the official mirror, not a mirror from a different country. And the fact that I have enabled the checkbox source, it has added these characters, so space, DEB-SRC once and twice. So -DEB-SRC. Okay. As much as possible, you should not edit this file by hand. You should instead use the dedicated graphical user interface application. This one with an and in the name, so software and updates. Okay, so in here you can select, I'm not sure what, another mirror, not to have source code. Or remove one of the components. Close, instant apply, reload, does an apt update. And now if we refresh this file, hopefully, now there's no -deb no, there's no space deb-src in here and in here. Okay, so the days of editing randomly by hand sources.list file have ended. If you want to add another repository that's not from Ubuntu, you should use in here a in /etc/app/sources.list.da.list file. If it's Ubuntu, the official repositories for the operating system, then the extension should be .sources, not .list. F10 doesn't exit Midnight Commander, that's a problem. Okay, let's do something similar for Fedora. So let's open the terminal. How do we do that? When did I close the terminal? Sudo su ask for the password of the Linux user, that's not root, so administrator in this case, and dnf search mc PyCharm. What is that? Google Chrome, what is that? So it seems that there's additional repositories available. So RPM Fusion with NVIDIA drivers, RPM Fusion with Steam, the game app store, and Google Chrome, the web browser, and PyCharm for JetBrains integrated development environment for Python. These repositories have been probably added when I have enabled that, when the software app store has asked me if I want to enable third-party repositories. Okay, this is the application, the RPM that I want. So DNF install MC. MC GPM is for mouse integration, slang is for text user interfaces. The default option is not to install, which is not okay. Should be yes. And let's see the /etc directory and MC. DNF. F3. Okay, F10. What does F10 do? It seems to select this plus button. F10. Yes, that's what it does. It focuses this button that I do not know what it does. Probably opens new tabs. Okay, F10. Okay, not a good default. F10 should be left available for text user interface applications. Okay, and then we can see that there are differences in theming. Control T doesn't do anything. Okay. More than just color schemes, there's different icons. These are bolder, and this looks like a tombstone, whereas this looks like a window. The scroll bar in Ubuntu is slimmer. Okay, let's see if we can improve the fonts. How do we do that? Search by font. Font. Where do I search? where do I improve the font anti-aliasing and snapping to the grid and RGB and other things. This thing. Nope. I'm not sure where fonts are. Appearance. The wallpapers, the default wallpapers are different. The wallpapers in general are different. In Ubuntu, there's this color chooser. Let's search on the internet. How do I change font rendering in GNOME? Okay, so the internet says that maybe we need the GNOME Tweaks app. This tool is a real boon. How do we install it? Apt install GNOME Tweaks. Okay, let's try to do it in graphical user interface mode. So all apps, where are you? So software, where is the software? This guy. Search, how do I search? Explore. Tweaks. GNOME Tweaks, this thing. Install from Fedora Linux. Great. The Ubuntu machine has frozen. How do we fix that? Save. And start. Nope. Let's shut it down. Reboot. Nope. Force reset. Okay, let's open GNOME Tweaks. Extension management has moved to the application GNOME extensions. We recommend downloading GNOME extensions from FlatHub. What is that? Okay, fonts. Hinting, make it full. Anti-aliasing, subpixel. And what now? Hopefully it's instant apply. Let's restart. Okay, so the App Center. Search for tweaks. Doesn't really find it. How do we do that? GNOME tweaks. So if I search by tweaks, doesn't find anything. because it's filtered by snap packages by default. Cool. Cool selection. So should be all, not filtered by anything by default. Install. Okay, how do we launch the application? Where is the button to launch the application? I don't see it. So let's start it a different way. 2 weeks. This guy. Okay, fonts. It's slide by default, which is better than nothing. So let's go full. And anti-aliasing subpixel is on by default, which is really good. Let's also restart this virtual machine. Restart. Yes. Okay, so let's get to a conclusion. Both Ubuntu 24.04, which is a long-term support version, has been released, will be released these days, so around April 2024, and the Fedora 40 has been released in April 2024. They use a similar desktop GNOME shell, but a bit of a different set of settings on Ubuntu 24.04, which are different from the vanilla GNOME shell experience. So different wallpapers, different color scheme. This panel shown by default, always shown. Maximize, minimize button available by default. And they're replacing the software default GNOME App Store with this App Center, which is the default Ubuntu application, graphical user interface application for managing both deb packages and snaps, and downloading applications from the Snap Store. Both come with Firefox by default. It's possible to install with a minimum number of applications by default. Okay, so you can install them without many applications. And from here on, use the available app stores and install all of the applications that you usually use. Of course, being GNOME shell, some of the settings are not available in the settings application of GNOME, but you will need GNOME tweaks or maybe additional command line instantiations to configure GNOME to your liking. Thank you.